We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edges of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude. Taking the time to look into one another's faces and find communion there, a reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. Good morning. I'm Joyce Thompson, one of the worship associates here at Community Unitarian Universal Church of Plano, here to introduce our wonderful Pastor Kris Cervantes this morning for our virtual service. Over the past month, Pastor Kris has been presenting a three-part series called The Intersection of Wisdom and Compassion. And this is part 2 of that series called Love Carefully. Saint Clare of Assisi founded the first order of Franciscan women, like the monks, who were devoted to service and poverty. And Saint Clare said, "We become what we love, and what we love shapes what we become. If we love something, we become something. And if we love nothing, we become nothing." Pastor Kris asks, what does it mean to be careful in our devotion?
Come, come, whoever you are. Have you come here for answers today? For certainty? Have you come wishing for someone, anyone, to tell you what to do? Alas, this is not that church, and we are not those people. Have you come here with questions today, with curiosity? Have you come wishing for someone, anyone, to wonder with you? Welcome then, for we are that church, and we are those people. We are the wanderers, the worshipers, the oath takers and oath breakers. We're lovers of leaving, of learning, of longing. We're keepers of faith, returning and growing. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come and worship with us at Community Unitarian Universalist Church this morning.
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not hinder, to bless and not curse, to serve you, Spirit of Freedom. Love is a decision. It is a judgment. It is a promise, according to Erich Fromm, the psychologist. The congregation of this church is joined not by a creed, but by shared values. And each week we renew this promise by saying aloud together, "Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another."
It's been a long time coming, seeming Feeling like we all been running. Feeling like the Wild West gunning. Listen to our elders shunning.
Flipping on the news, speed talking. All about our problems, shocking. We put on our headphones, walking. We put on our headphones. Where did we all go wrong? Love. La 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 love. La 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 love. La la la. Where did we all go wrong? All we see is faces, color. All the other races, other. Why can't you just be my brother? We don't have to kill one another. All around the world, we are one. All around the world, we are one. Where do we all go wrong? Love. La 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 love. La 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 love. La 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 love. Where do we all go wrong? La 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 love. La 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 love. La 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 love. Where did we all go wrong? 'Cause we got the same blood. Yeah, we got the same blood. But will it be enough? No. Will it be enough?
We got the same heartbeat. We're living for the same dreams. We got the same bloodstream. Where did we all go wrong? Where do we all go wrong? La 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 love. La 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 love. La 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 love. Where do we all go wrong? La 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 love. La 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 love. La 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 love. Where did we all go wrong? La 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 love. La 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 love. La 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 love. Where did we all go wrong?
Today's reading comes from philosopher and theologian John Caputo from his short but eminently helpful book on religion, Thinking in Action. If language of God bothers you, you may wish to substitute the good in your mind when you hear these words. Thank you. The name of God is the name of the ever-open question. Unlike reductionists who think that the name of God closes every question down, that it supplies a ready-made answer for every possible question, the name of God in my postmodern itinerarium is the name of infinite questionability, of what is endlessly questionable, for no name can cause my head to spin more than the name of what I love and desire. But what do I love when I love my God? In loyalty to St. Augustine, who said these words first, I have retained the what, but of course, if I dared to correct a saint, which I never would, I would in all fear and trembling have furtively amended the what to how. How do I love when I love my God? For love is a how, not a what. We have defined religion in terms of the love of God, but the love of God cannot be defined or contained by religion. The love of God is too important to leave to the religions or the theologians when it comes to loving God, who is in and who is out. We get a clue from a very famous parable in the New Testament in Matthew. When none of the wedding guests who have been invited show up for the feast, The host sends his servants out into the streets to bring in the strangers and casual passersby who just happen to be in the neighborhood, who are not dressed for the occasion, and who do not even know the bride and the groom. Can you imagine a more unimaginable and unbelievable wedding reception than that? But that, we are told by Jesus, is how the kingdom of God works. The kingdom of God, the place where God's love rules, does not turn on formal invitation lists and formal memberships, but includes anyone who does justice in spirit and in truth. Anyone who loves is born of God. The kingdom of God is a how, not a what. What do I love when I say I love my God? Not the burnt offerings and solemn assemblies, but justice. Is justice then another word for God? Or is God another word for justice? We have insisted upon the undecidability of this sort of question, to which we should now add an insistence upon its pointlessness. If I serve the neighbor in the name of God, or if I serve the neighbor in the name of justice, what difference does it make? The meaning of God is enacted, or else it is refused and we devote our time instead to building up our stock portfolio. It is enacted equally but differently in Mahatma Gandhi, who waged non-violent battle with evil, in the life and death of Jesus, who was executed because of the subversiveness of his message, even as it is enacted in the reverence of Chief Joseph for the majesty of the natural world, who expressed astonishment at the perversity of the white man's idea that the earth belongs to humans instead of recognizing that we belong to the earth. The love of God is enacted whenever our human, all too human drives are contradicted and thrown into reverse, and we're drawn out of ourselves by something larger than ourselves. When our powers and our potencies come unhinged and we are left hanging by a prayer for the impossible. By asking Augustine's question, "What do I love when I love my God?" we concede that the love of God is radically or ineradicably translatable, that we cannot contain the process of substitution or translation that sets it in motion. But the translation is not a semantic process, but an existential or pragmatic one. It is not a matter of finding a dictionary equivalent for the love of God, but of doing it, of giving testimony to it, of seeing that its effect is to translate us into action, to move and bestir us. Love is not a meaning to be defined, but something to do, something to make. When we pondered the translatability or substitutability of those two terms, God and love, God and justice, and we asked which is a translation of which, we were looking in the wrong place for a translation. In the translatability of the love of God, it is we who are to be translated, transformed, and carried over into action, carried off by the movements of love, carried away by the transcendence that this word means and commands and calls. The translation of the love of God is transcendence. It is the movement that it names, the deed that it demands. For the love of God is something to do. The love of God is not explained or explicated in proposition, but testified to, enacted, and performed. We're told again and again in our lives to be careful of who and what we love. Soon after the turn of the 13th century, Clare of Assisi wrote to her sister Agnes, "We become what we love, and who we love shapes what we become. If we love things, we become a thing. If we love nothing, we become nothing." Bit stark, but the basic point stands. Be careful of who you love. Be careful of how you love. And what? We may be silent about our passions, but they proclaim truths to the rest of the world about us, even if we never open our mouths. One of the best things about Clare's maxim is how fun it is to apply to other people in morality tales. The author who did this in a most exemplary fashion might be Roald Dahl. The beloved children's author and former spy gave us a whole book about it, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The glutton Augustus Gloop figuratively drowns in chocolate. Violet Beauregard, the chewing gum fanatic, turns as blue as the blueberry gum. The thieving, wasteful Veruca Salt is stolen by squirrels and thrown into the garbage. They know a bad nut when they see one. And Mike TV, well, Mike literally goes into TV. One side effect of loving things is that you begin to see people as things, too. Some people, at least, people who aren't right in front of you, people who are distant, physically, culturally, thoughtfully. They don't look like me, we think, so they're not really like me. Their needs are suspect, their agency in doubt. And I could stand here and rail self-righteously about that, and I will. When you see people as things to be weighed, judged, and then used or discarded, then terrible consequences follow. We've seen refugee children and families caged. Women denied chances and choices in an ongoing assault on their autonomy over their own bodies. African Americans gunned down by their neighbors or the police officers who are supposed to protect them. We've seen the disabled mocked, the poor dismissed, as if their fate isn't our own, as if their needs aren't the same as ours, as if their dreams weren't our own. Most recently, we've seen how swiftly the lines between us and them can shift, be abrogated, and then shredded. Watching privileged white men and some women beating a Capitol police officer with a Blue Lives Matter flag really says it all. More evidence that violence and hate are concomitant with this view of the other as less than worthy, unimportant, as if those other people weren't fully, well, people, not quite human at all. But this tendency to love things more than people, to relegate other people to the status of thing, this tendency isn't the property of just one movement, or just one party, or just one culture. We all do it. In my own admittedly liberal circles, it's practically fashionable to question the intelligence and integrity of every single member of conservative groups. How quick we are on the left to agree that those on the right are inhuman and inhumane. Stop. End of story. Now, let me be clear. I am not drawing a false equivalency here. I'm certainly not saying that today, when I am just itching to hold some conservatives to account. There are those in power who do act inhumanely. Power conveys the unique ability to not only dismiss others as things, but to keep them in that category forcibly if necessary. Those dark-eyed immigrants at the border are dirty, we're told, by the same people who are denying them clean water to bathe in. That black kid that stole some cigarettes from the convenience store is dangerous and desperate, we are told, by the same people who have taken away his safety, his dignity, his education, and his hope. Those protesters are an angry un-American mob, we are told. as those protesters' jobs are taken away or transformed into unpaid labor, as their paychecks are stopped, and as their homes are foreclosed upon. And when the angry, all too American mob does, in fact, attempt a violent overthrow of the government, we're told these are real Americans. These are the ones who go unheard, despite the fact that there is an entire industry built around catering to conservative extremism, as if racism were some side issue, not the deeply rooted core of their cause. There is this problem of dehumanization in this nation, and it is our duty as thoughtful, compassionate people, as Unitarian Universalists, to speak up and stand up and lie down with those people who are designated as less than. Sometimes they're even us. Whether or not our leaders feel beholden to all Americans, including potential Americans, we know that we, here in this congregation, we are accountable to ourselves and to them all. And we're accountable to more than just humans if it comes down to it. We're accountable to the earth herself and all the creatures that creep and crawl and swim and fly and grow. So no, I'm not saying that abuses of power are okay. And I'm not saying the current administration and those who support it and enable it and spur it on should be let off the hook. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that we, too, are on the hook. I'm saying if we don't like being treated like and even called things, then we need to notice when we do it too. And we need to stop. Because theoretically, and now very existentially, we know how dangerous that can be. If we label all conservatives as bad and evil and stupid, period, the end, we've made them less than human. Because the most human thing is to have hope. Hope for the potential to change and to be redeemed and to redeem ourselves. And if we write off whole populations, we're as guilty of dehumanization as anyone we might accuse. I hope that someday every skinhead and neo-Nazi and white nationalist and casual Confederate flag waving racist will figure out how harmful and sick racism is and wake up and change. I hope that my friends and relatives who think immigrants are scary and dangerous invaders will suddenly realize that white folks are the original scary, dangerous invaders. I hope that police officers will begin to understand that a job of service to the community means serving communities of color, instead of seeing them as enemy camps to be contained and beaten down. Because the problem is, those terrifying white people on the rampage are literally, as we have seen in the last 2 weeks with our very own eyes and heard with our ears, those people are our neighbors, our relatives, our coworkers. So I think, hard as it may be, that I have to hope for and work for their transformation alongside my own. When we talk about loving carefully, it means more than being careful of who and what we love. It means being careful of how we love. How do I love when I love my God? How do I love when I love the good? All of us are broken. The older I get and the more losses and trials and just plain life I experience, the more broken I become. If I am a clay vessel, I'm one with cracks and chips, scuff marks and scrapes. I've fallen apart and been glued back together, not necessarily with gold leaf, And it's happened enough times that I'm even more fragile and breakable than I was before. And because of this, because of my own fragility, I have to be careful of how I love. I take love seriously, and I have a lot of it, and I know you do too, because I've seen how seriously you take love, and I've seen how fiercely you love, and how deeply and fully. To hold something as weighty and powerful as love in this battered and repaired clay vessel means holding it, handling it with care, carefully. It means that when we love, we take that love seriously and we handle it tenderly. And so we love. And we love with boundaries and devotion and commitment and curiosity and humility. We learn to listen for what is actually needed by the ones we love rather than imposing our own needs on them. We speak out when we love, but we don't speak over. Martin Luther King wrote in his letter from Birmingham jail, "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." I know we've all heard those words before. I know that for those of us who are white, those words are painful to hear. I know that the first time I heard them, I went into defensive mode before I finally was able to realize that although they are painful and they do hurt, that doesn't mean they're not true. It doesn't mean they're wrong. When we love carelessly, love can become a burden and a botheration to those on the receiving end. When we love selfishly, the results are selfish. Any good we do is sort of coincidental, a happy accident along the way. And we see this in lots of contexts. Think about disaster response and how desperately we want to help and how badly we so often do. We send unneeded clothes or unhelpful ideas or money that is sometimes squandered by those who are supposedly loving overseers of disaster relief. Think about poverty tourism, homeless for a weekend camps, mission trips to Guatemala, and the ways that we want to understand poverty. We want to be moved to deeper compassion, but instead, we turn human communities into zoo habitats to be observed and then left behind, back to comfort and to careless love, and to viewing people as things, by the way. In a recent conversation with colleagues, the topic of charity versus advocacy arose in this context. Are both needed in justice work? It's what we're arguing. And I would say yes. Charity addresses immediate needs, and advocacy addresses systemic change. Charity means your lights are on and there's food in the pantry. Advocacy means laws are passed, policies are changed, and accountability is taken seriously. But it's clear, isn't it, that between charity and advocacy, which one is careful love and which is casual? There's nothing wrong with throwing money at a problem, but it doesn't take much listening or curiosity or risk. To love carefully is to pursue justice more deeply, and this is the good news, and more effectively. A drowning swimmer doesn't need us to throw them a sack full of gold. They need a life preserver and someone to drain the pool. Loving carefully helps us see the real needs and desires of those we love, and to do something useful to meet those needs and clear the way for those desires, those ambitions and dreams. We become what we love, and who we love shapes what we become, said Clare of Assisi. She took love very seriously. She knew, as we do, that all of us have broken places, and all of us both have and need love. We have a lot of love to give, so much love, given so freely. And we also need that amount of love back. We need love and to be beloved. Our lives are spent in the pursuit of love and the surrender to it. Because this is so, we are called to love with care, intention, and thoughtfulness, with boundaries, yes, and with tenderness, but also, and perhaps most importantly, with hope for transformation within ourselves and out there in the great big world. Go in peace and love carefully.
Sometimes I'm right and I can be wrong. My own beliefs are in my songs. Butcher, the baker, the drummer, and then makes no difference what group I'm in.
But sometimes I'm right and I can be wrong. My own beliefs are in my song. The butcher, the banker, the drummer, and then it makes no difference what group I'm in. 'Cause I am everyday people.
There is a blue one that can't accept the green one, for living with the fat one, trying to be a skinny one. Different strokes for different folks, and so on and so on. And Scooby Dooby 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 Doo. Sha sha. We got to live together.
I am no better, and neither are you. We are the same, whatever we do. You love me, you hate me, you know me, and then still can't figure out the thing I'm in.
And everyday people.
Yeah, yeah.
There is a long hair that doesn't like the short hair, for being such a rich one that will not help the poor one. Different strokes for different folks, and so on and so on. And Scooby Dooby Doo. Sha sha. We got to live together. There is a yellow one that won't accept the black one, that won't accept the red one, that won't accept the white one. Different strokes for different folks, and so on and so on. And Scooby Dooby Doo. Sha sha. And everyday people.
Nathaniel Hawthorne said, "Generosity is the flower of justice." As we think about loving carefully, we can appreciate the works for justice that we support at this church. The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather there to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all the world's faith traditions, to bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We deeply appreciate the ongoing generosity of our members in sharing time and treasure in support of the loving actions of this church. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the keepers of this dream. You can donate by sending a check to our church address, or you can go online at communityuuchurch.org and press the blue Donate Now button. Thank you so much for your continuing support. We have now come to the end of this service, and it's time to extinguish the chalice. Please join me in saying these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
If God is love, and love is just another word for God, then I tell you that it is important that we love carefully, just as we worship carefully. And I share with you these words from Henry Nouwen, a philosopher and theologian. Theological formation is the gradual and often painful discovery of God's incomprehensibility. You may be competent in many things, but you cannot be competent in God. And so it is with humility, curiosity, courage, and a little irreverence that I send you out into the world, loving carefully, remaining curious, and being ready to understand that love is an action.